let me toggle between
Anita Baggy texted we are on. I don't know if that was for attendance or for what you're referring to.
I think that was it. All right, great. All right. All right, guys, we're going to go ahead and get started. Thank you so much for being here this evening with the EDI committee. I know that we're going to have people to join later. You know, we're all still getting used to it. It doesn't matter if you do, I guess, 6 or 7 of these a day. It's still new, especially if you're the person who is navigating this. And so I welcome you and really appreciate the time and energy that you've given to this and given to this work. And I see that our board chair is now on, and I think we almost have a quorum. Let's see. How many participants do we have? Well, actually, we have 13, so we do have a quorum. So I think we're ready to begin. Ms. Deesup, if you would like to open.
Sure. Good afternoon, everyone. Given the events of this past week, all of us that are leading this committee wanted to open with a moment of reflection. It seemed like we needed to acknowledge what has happened, the tragic events of Minneapolis. We just felt like we needed to acknowledge that and start with that. And really, I thought I would like to open the floor to anyone that felt called to speak on it. If anyone had any thoughts, this committee stands for equity, stands for diversity, stands for inclusion. And I think it's important that we stand together. The virus has built up walls around us, and now is the time, figuratively, literally, we need to try to bring those down. And it's important that I think this work is more important than ever. So if anyone would like to say anything at this time, speak your thoughts, speak your heart. But I wanted us to try to come together on this.
Well, I'll say I really appreciate you opening that way. And I'll say that I've heard from quite a few of my colleagues, my white colleagues, my African-American colleagues. And this, of course, is touching all of them and touching them, many of them in very different ways. For a lot of my white colleagues, they're just unsure of what to say. But they know that they need to say something. And then for a lot of my African-American colleagues, especially if they're mothers, you know, the fears is very real. And so I really do appreciate you opening the meeting this way.
I just want to say I'm exhausted. This is just insane. I mean, you have COVID-19, Ahmaud Arbery, you have George Floyd, the list goes on and on and on, and we continue to have conversations, and you have your white friends who are genuinely concerned and have empathy for the situation. But you're tired of addressing the situation. You are tired of being in a space where You have to address the situation, or you're expected to address the situation. And then you have to balance that when you're in other circles where it's even more of a safe space where you can even allow your raw emotions to come forward. And then you turn on the news and you see what's happening in your city and every other city. And yeah, it's just exhausting. I I really don't even have energy to be here tonight, but this is valuable. And there aren't many solutions that we can offer. We have to vote. We have to be there, and then you see peaceful protests, and you don't even want to be involved in a peaceful protest. And you think about raising your children in a society that doesn't truly, as a whole, want you around. And then you still have to carry on with everyday life, your work, your responsibilities, grocery shopping, all of those things. And it's crazy because you can walk down the street and not even truly know who's for you or who's against you. And you see what happens, and you see the disparities, and you really don't have much to say. I was offered to be on an Instagram live conversation where they wanted to present ways to heal for our cultures, Black and white and other different ethnicities, to move together and to move forward. And quite frankly, I told them I'm not even here for that anymore. I don't have time for the conversation, which I'm not telling you that's what everyone should say. I'm just telling you where I am and how I feel. And I'm just tired of talking. I am not supporting looting. I am not supporting rioting. How else are people going to be heard? And then how do we move forward beyond violence? And still trying to figure out what do we need to do as a people to protect ourselves. That's really all I have to say.
I echo a lot of those same sentiments. I think the one emotion that I'm feeling right now is just raw, complete raw. I feel like I'm inside out. I started grad school this summer, and I'm doing the conflict resolution and management course. And one of our assignments this past week was looking at the Charlottesville Unite the Right rally. So I was in the middle of a 4-page paper for that, response paper to that, all last week. And I started it late. So just kind of watching everything unfold, and then was writing the paper, finishing touches last night, as I was also watching the Facebook Live clips from downtown and the news coverage of everything with that. And it just, I couldn't even finish writing anymore. I just had to 3-4 hours of my time was just witnessing everything that was happening and watching it unfold, from how it started to midway through to just how it kind of all ended there at 11 o'clock. And just, again, just a complete feeling of rawness. I feel like it always, I'm a Black American in America, so it always encompasses every aspect of my life. But just yesterday, I just felt like everything was about me and my identity as a Black woman, my response to my identity as a Black woman. It was just never ending, and it was so exhausting. And then you turn on and you wake up this morning, and like Sean said, you have to carry on with your day. You put your clothes on, brush your teeth, get ready, you go to work, and you're in meetings with people, again, who you don't know who your true allies are. It's really made, that's probably one of the toughest things, is questioning who I thought were friends, who, when I see some of their posts or some of what they're saying, these aren't people who could be my friends. Those are statements that go against everything that I am, and not even just on a personal level or of disagreements, but just my foundation of the very being of who I am. So it's just been very, very exhausting and raw experience.
And I'll add, there's an article that's circulating. I've seen it several times, and it was actually mentioned. And Sean, you might have seen it in the IDA group. Just essentially, the title is, white people. If you believe that your Black colleagues are okay, even if they tell you that they are, they're not, and we're not. I mean, as both Chris and Sean have said, you get up every day, you put the smile on your face, and you come to work because you really don't have a choice. But it hits home, and it hits home very, very personally for all of us. So if you haven't seen that, I would at the very least encourage you to, because in my opinion, it's very well written and it's very, very honest.
So are we into our feelings? Hello, everyone. Are we kind of into our feelings right now with the reflections?
Yes.
We are.
Well, I can say I'm angry. I'm sick. I've felt sick on the stomach for the last couple of days, especially yesterday. Hurt, disappointed, all of the things. It seems like there's a sense of hopelessness and despair. At one point, I was thinking to myself, this seems like a really bad reality show where everything's just really gone bad. And, and Black and brown people are falling behind in health, wealth, everything, just safety, overall well-being. And, but, you get to that point and you do get into that slump and you withdraw. As many of you know, I'm the president of the Wilmington chapter of the Links, and I had some ladies calling me yesterday that wanted me to just kind of like warn the other members of the group about the stuff that was going on downtown. And I just kind of was like, I'm not in that mood today. I don't want to have to do that. I'm sure they're watching the news and I'm sure they see it. But then I thought it's probably my responsibility as the leader of the group to acknowledge and make sure that everyone is safe and do what I can do to help them feel safe. So I pulled myself together enough to get that email put out and sent did a couple of phone calls. And so I still kind of felt, and then someone else called me and he sent me a message. They called me, I didn't respond. Then they sent me a message, one of the officers, and I sent them back and I was like, can I call you tomorrow? I just couldn't talk about it anymore. I guess I'm kind of like Sean, I'm tired of talking about it. And, but I know we have to have these conversations. We have to have the conversation. So, we have to, like you say, get up in the morning, get yourself together. And, you got to start the conversation. You have to acknowledge that this did happen, and address the feelings that you're having and deal with it and say, okay, where do we go from here? And we do have to go somewhere from here because we can't get stuck. We cannot be stuck. We already have, in my opinion, Black people in particular have already been stuck for over 400 years. So, I have Black grandsons that are 6, and I'm not so much worried about myself like that anymore, but I certainly am worried about them and what their future will be like. So I'm really sick about what their future would be like. I would like to see this a much better place for them going forward, where they don't have to always have the conversations at 5 and 6 years old about how white people treat them or how this country treats them or how police treat African-American males or African-Americans or people of color. It's not there. They need to be able to have the opportunity to grow up, just like many other privileged people do have that opportunity. And so I'm a little bit angry about that, but I'm going to do my part that I can do to help address the wrong in this society, whatever little bit that might be. I'm going to try to do my part. So that's kind of where I am.
I would just like to share that I'm never going to know what it's like to walk in your shoes as an African American male or female. But what I am promising myself now more than ever is to continue to listen and learn. And when I can, make sure that I'm able to advocate. And I also think that the most important part of that for me is starting here at home and having conversations around racism with my 8-year-old son and understanding that when he looks in the mirror, he understands that he has privilege and what he can do with that for the good and how to be anti-racist. And that is my goal moving forward. And my heart just breaks for all of you and our community in general. And I just wish I could hug everybody, and I can't.
I want to thank everyone that shared. I know when we started this committee, we talked about how it was important sometimes to be uncomfortable and to have these conversations that lead to discomfort because that leads to growth. I'll be honest, I don't think that we would ever have a conversation like this because I don't think anyone, well, I never expected to see a video like that. And it was so sad and so horrifying. And I'm shaken from a white person's perspective, which is not anything like what you all, I think, are going through. And to echo what Stephanie said, I don't know. But I hope we can do good work in this committee. I feel very strongly about it. And I hope we can make some strides and move forward. And I truly appreciate you all feeling comfortable enough to share your very valuable perspectives, especially today.
Well, then again, I thank you for opening the meeting that way. I know that a couple of other people have just kind of signed on, and specifically what we are just kind of finishing is just a moment of reflection in light of what is happening in our world today. And I don't know if there's anyone else who would like to speak.
Dr. Smith, can you hear me now clearly?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, this is Casey. I just want to send virtual good vibes and hugs and thoughts and prayers to everyone, and also just really grateful for those that have just shared. And for me and a lot of my colleagues over the weekend, we were working all day Sunday to brainstorm how do we make sure that we are creating a space this week for our students, because there was heavy on my heart, especially our students of color. And so I would be happy to link up with anyone else separately to talk about what we're doing. But I really appreciate the committee starting this way, because that's kind of what we wanted to do within the school. When we don't talk about things like this that are so obvious to our students, we perpetuate that silence, and silence is very loud. So thank you for modeling that.
Thank you for that, Casey. I really appreciate it. Is there anyone else?
I'll just say that it just makes our work so much more important of what we're trying to do. And I've been able to listen to different things, and because I've had the phase 1 training, I feel like I've been able to listen to things a little bit more critically and know when I hear something that is not accurate, even on some of our more progressive news stations, I've heard things that to me just were not accurate because I've been through training. So I think that, just the more, if we can do more of that, I think that's one place to try to start and to try to make a difference because, even on progressive media outlets, sometimes you hear it and they get it so wrong as well. And so many of the things that I've read and listened to have made me think so much about how important that training is and the training that we're working on and the training that we're doing and providing to our folks, and just need to keep on doing more of that. And my heart breaks for this whole situation.
I just wanted to read Sherry's comments. I know some of you guys are in cars and can't see the chat, but she wrote, "I don't have a microphone, but I have to share my thoughts. I have cried and prayed, cried and prayed. I feel like the trust of some white friends has been broken. I come from a background of knowing how to treat others in hopes I would be treated the same way, but I am questioning everything now. I say or do, or who I talk to. I feel a sense of broken, and I'm tired of the same thing over and over. My heart aches even though you don't see it on my face. When will it end?" My heart breaks. My heart breaks for this community. It breaks for our school system. I want to see us do better than we're doing. And sometimes I'm so sad that I'm perpetuating things. And I wonder, what can we do to stop it faster? This stuff weighs heavy on my heart and heavy on my family. It's huge. We talk about it with our girls all the time. I love you guys. So I want to support and do everything I can.
Thank you, Rachel.
And hey, guys, I want to echo what Casey and what Al were saying. Being phase one trained and having some bit of educational perspective, obviously not having experience in a way that many of you do. And I think a time like this and a time of conversation, a time of dialogue to better understand experiences and the personal perspective is so valuable. And I don't feel like I've taken every opportunity that I could to listen and gain a better understanding, because that's the only way I'm going to get it, is to listen, to be available, and use any opportunity at my disposal to be better for my community. And I don't know that I have other words other than I care and I want it better and I want to do the work to make it better. But I know that I need a better understanding. And I think that the first part of that is, or the first step in that is being really available and listening a lot. So thank you for sharing.
Thank you to everyone. I'm just so appreciative of you being here, your commitment to this work. And I think that there's an opportunity in front of us. I know when we were planning this meeting, we had some very honest conversations about really engaging in that work of anti-racism. And believe it or not, I actually push back against that a little bit, just simply because of how I'm positioned in this world. And I know the risk that comes to me. But what I will say, and hearing from all of you, it seems like, we've got a group of folks who really are willing to engage in that next level work. And if that is what we feel strongly about, because I believe it's what needs to be done. I think the opportunity does really sit in front of us. So I would love for us to continue to have that conversation and look at how we can use our group, our committee, to really truly engage in lifting our agenda even further, pushing it even farther. So thank you. At this time, if there's not anything else, then I think we can move forward with our agenda. I thank Ms. Estep and Ms. Adams in working with me to help develop this agenda. You know, as we continue to move this work forward. One thing that we had talked about last time was really articulating the work of the work group and this committee in figuring out how those two go together so that the work is more seamless and actually accelerated. So just wanted to, and I know it's a hard transition to make, but wanted to have a conversation just a little bit about how we go about doing that. How do we go about articulating and aligning this work in the work of the work group? And so I welcome your thoughts on that. I know I've had some initial conversation, but I'd be really interested in your thoughts. Well, I'll share one suggestion. One suggestion was to create a workflow. Well, maybe this committee could create its workflow. How do we, bring things to the agenda? How do we do our work? And then the work group could create its own workflow, and we could look at where there would be overlap and alignment. And then the other suggestion that was shared with me is that quite possibly we could create maybe a subcommittee between our two groups to put together a flow chart around that work, because we want to make sure it's connected and it's not disjointed. Thoughts about that?
I like the idea of creating a subgroup to put that workflow together jointly, because one thing that is not possible right now, but I would kind of be interested if it were, is to maybe like even attend one of their meetings or shadow somebody or just have a better understanding of what they're doing. So I think having a joint, somebody from like people from both teams come together to create that workflow would be really valuable.
Other thoughts?
I think it might, sorry for my lateness. I don't know. I just feel like there's a lot of back and forth about this, because I know we keep getting delayed because of COVID, but I don't know if there's a way to like kind of just divide and conquer instead of trying to do this beautiful, everybody works together and has a workflow thing. Like, I think it might make more sense to assign something to them and have something to us. And I know there's, no matter what, there's going to be overlap because our flow, like our goals are similar. But I just feel like we're not necessarily getting anywhere because we don't seem to have this, like, I get that cohesiveness would be wonderful, but in real life, that's not happening. And I understand why it's not. I'm not upset that it's not happening. I get why. But what makes more sense to me is to kind of say, okay, this group is going to do this and this group is going to do this, similar to what we did when we separated into our 3 groups. Because this way we were kind of clear about like, okay, we're focusing on culture, we're focusing on SMART goals, we're focusing on this. Like, it was very clear. And I think that that's going to maybe help us to get somewhere, instead of, because now you're creating subgroups to help communicate, and then that's more work for people. And then we're still dividing with people that we haven't met. And when I say dividing, I mean trying to divide work with people that we don't have relationships with, that we don't meet with regularly. It's just an option. I mean, I'm up for whatever.
Well, and friend John, I appreciate your comment, and I think you actually have described it perfectly. In that really our group should inform the work of the work group. So it should be that we're doing one thing and they're doing something different. So you're exactly right in that. But we're the ones that should be driving that. And there's a disconnect between how it gets from us and how it gets to them. So you know, listening to both you and Jennifer, my suggestion, and Rachel, you definitely chime in, and Koresh, you definitely chime in, because you guys sit on both and Tyler sits on both. Would it make sense if you, Tyler, Rachel, you, Koresh, and Tyler worked on creating that kind of continuity between the 2 groups? Would that make sense if that was something that you guys were tasked with?
That makes sense to me, and it's definitely something that I can do. And I'm sure, can't speak for Tyler, but I know he would be up for doing whatever help to move the work of both groups forward.
Agreed. Happy to do so.
Okay. Because I mean, well, again, you guys sit on that work group, and I think they're very eager to move forward. And of course, COVID, you know, really kind of shut us down, because our next step in our work was actually working with students, which I know is a passion of Casey's, which I think is going to be critical for us to elevate and move forward. And so, you know, having that better articulation and, you know, and I think would help, so that we could, you know, we've gotten back on track. So getting them back on track, and then there's not this redundancy, but there's just this flow toward our goals. So we'll do that as an action step. Ms. Cherry, if you can kind of record that as an action step. So that'll be Rachel, Tyler, and Koresh working on that. So thank you for that.
Dr. Smith?
Yes, ma'am.
Is it anticipated that we're going to continue to work through the summer? And is that the case with the work group?
So yes,
Okay.
yes. I mean, I know a lot of folks are teachers, but we started the work back, but we've met before during the summer. And I think the folks who are on the team would be very willing to do that. And I think now that we're actually meeting virtual, I think it actually makes it a little easier in terms of the flexibility of space. But
Okay.
but yes.
Great.
Yes. And just blink and that summer will be over. I promise you. So then the next thing is we wanted to have a little bit of a conversation that just in thinking about sometimes where we bog down might be in the fact that we don't have identified leads for our subcommittees. And then also one of our subcommittees, it's been suggested that we collapse them into the other 2 and then maybe expand one of those. And so the subcommittee we would collapse would be policy. And Ms. Estep, I don't know if you would like to speak about the work of the School Boards Association, what they're doing with policy. And so that why that kind of would move us away from needing that policy subgroup.
Sure. So a couple of months ago, our board contracted with the North Carolina School Boards Association to completely do an overhaul of our policy manual. So which is an 18-month to 2-year process. So the NHCS BOE is going to come in and look at every single one of our policies and make sure that they are aligned with both federal and state statutes. And then we will have a chance to work with the legal team at the NHCS BOE to also tweak those policies and make them our own. So we have the option to make sure that we are in alignment with all applicable laws, but also we have the chance to make them to tailor them for our county and for our school system. So, like I said, it's a fairly lengthy undertaking, and we anticipate it taking about 18 months to 2 years. We are tackling, I think it's the 2000 series right now, and the series numbers don't line up. We are also going online and using their policy services. So as we transition, our old policy manual that's online will slowly disappear and a new one will come online. And we hope it'll be a lot more streamlined, easier to follow. You can search things by I think word, by a keyword. It should make things a lot easier for the public to find. But we have a chance to provide a lot more input as well throughout that process. So that's why we were thinking that we can have a chance to certainly weigh in on policies and see where we can look at things from an equity standpoint. But as of right now, we don't really have a need for the policy subcommittee until those policies start to come online. And certainly we can suggest that certain policies, as we like maybe a discipline policy, we can ask that we maybe move that up the line. But to have an entire group or subcommittee devoted to that right now just didn't seem to make much sense.
Okay. Thoughts on that? And I very much agree. I want to make sure that our energies and efforts right now are directed toward those things that are going to have the greatest gain for our students and our teachers in our schools. And since we have such an investment being done by the School Boards Association in terms of policy, I think our reinvestment will come later, as Ms. Issa described. So thoughts about that, concerns?
I think it's a great idea. I think that although I love the idea of like diving into the policy and kind of mapping it out and maximizing effective change, I think that the people that the board has contracted it out to probably have more expertise, than certainly I would. Probably not the rest of you all, but certainly I would. And so I think that, let's be efficient at that and let them come up with some good jobs or good recommendations based on all the benchmarking that they're able to have access to that I simply don't have access to. So I think it's a great idea.
There was a question about who we've contracted with. It's the North Carolina School Boards Association. And LaShawn and Stephanie and I had talked about at a later meeting having them come and speak to our group, and they can answer any questions about any kind of legal questions about how they move through the process. And if the committee has questions about certain policies, they can ask them. So I know that they would be happy to come and speak to the group.
This is Andy, and Sean and I have been on the policy subcommittee the whole time, and I also think it's a good idea. It's been only the two of us trying to work to get it done, so it would be very difficult for us to do that. So I agree, particularly when we have not had access to the data as well. So it has made it very difficult to progress. So I'm in agreement with it.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And so with the policy committee, subcommittee disbanding, we thought it might be advantageous to take a look at the SMART goals and to break it out a little bit into maybe academic and behavioral goals. And so, so our SMART goals would be what we would want to see around academics and what we would want to see around behavior. And we surely can change the title from behavior to social emotional to whatever the subcommittee wants that to be. And then we'd end up with 2 subcommittees unless folks thought we needed another. It would be academic and behavioral goals and then community and culture. And so what we need to do are identify team leads. And what those team leads would do is we would move to once a month meetings instead of the meeting every 2 weeks. And there would be an interim subcommittee meeting. So you would still be meeting twice a month, but once with the whole group and then once with the subcommittee. And so the full committee meetings monthly and then the subcommittee meetings monthly. And we would start this in July because on June 15th, we have an HR update, which I'm sure everybody wants to hear that. I'm really eager to hear that as well. So then we would start those meetings in July with 2 meetings per month. The team leads would schedule theirs, although we would give you a suggested date, and then we would have our regular monthly meeting. So thoughts about that? Because what we saw was there wasn't work happening outside of the committee. And it was really unreasonable to ask people to meet 3 times or 4 times per month. So we wanted to give you that time since you're coming anyway and you're setting that time aside. So what I'd like to do now is to get self-nominations for who, or either nominations for who would be our team lead for academic and behavioral goals, and then who would be our team lead for community and culture. And I would do anything that you needed to be done to support you in your role. I could do any, mini, miny, mo with the squares on my computer screen. I was trying to avoid that. So I guess I'm going to have to go to any, mini, miny, mo.
Dr. Smith, I'm happy to help out if you need me to on the academic and behavioral piece.
All right, thank you, OB.
So, Dr. Smith, I had a question. So the academic and the behavior are going to be the same group then?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, that's one group.
Okay.
Is it possible, though, at some point, depending on what the work is that occurs within that group, that could break out into academic, behavioral, social, emotional? I mean, there's possibility, but for right now, where we're at.
Very much so. And I think, you know, where we are, maybe that a lot of our academic goals will lead into behavioral goals and behavioral goals will lead into academic goals. So they're overlap, not that we would even have separate goals, but there would be both pieces to that. And again, the name surely can change. So we've got Al O'Brien as our team leader.
And I don't mind being a partner with Al in that. I certainly feel like that the social, emotional, and behavioral areas is, you know, kind of where I belong.
Okay.
Thank you, Julie.
And I think team leads and co-leads are actually a really, really good idea.
And it looks like Tyler was voluntold.
Oh,
on the
Tyler
chat
was?
For the his name came up in the chat.
Oh my goodness. Want to nominate Tyler. Thank you, Lena. You won't tell him who nominated him. So Tyler.
I can support him, but I think he has more experience on the committee aspect of it.
Okay.
And I know a lot about culture and community, and I can support from that standpoint, but I don't want to do it all by myself because I'm too new to these things.
Okay. So would you be his co-lead then?
Sure.
Okay.
If he takes it, is he in the meeting? I don't know if he's even in the meeting.
That's what he gets for choosing his wife's birthday over hanging out with us.
Oh yeah, that happens.
Okay, so Tyler and Lena and Al and Julie, thank you so much. So now I want to try something that's a little advantageous, is to actually put you in breakouts, so that we can spend a little bit of this time having a conversation and doing a little bit of that work. What I've done is I've captured the long-term and the short-term goals. So this would be for community and culture. These are the long-term, and we talked about this last time. And then these are the short-term. And so I went back to the spreadsheet, and thanks Casey, and I think Rachel as well for sending me that link, and went back to the spreadsheet and captured those. And then on the, doesn't work unless my mouse is in the right place. Sorry. Oops, sorry. And then, so these are the long-term and short-term for what would be the academic and behavioral goals. So if you guys want to do, jot those down, because I don't know if you'll be able to see them when you're in the breakouts. Maybe even there you go, take a picture with your phone. What did we do without phones? So that's long and short term. And then I'm going to go to the community and culture. And so what I'm going to do is I want to make sure I've got everybody. So Casey's in culture. Karen, you're in culture. If I say it wrong, let me know. Al is in academic and behavior. Andy, where did you want to be now that we're not in our current groups or in policy?
I prefer academic and behavior.
Okay. Okay. Caress is in academic and behavior. And Sean, where would you like to be?
I think I'd prefer academic and behavior too, please.
Okay. And then Sean, you're in culture. Jennifer, you're in academic and behavior. Julie, academic behavior. Lena, culture. Missy Step, if you'll remind me which one is yours.
I think I was moonlighting in policy, so just put me where you need to make up the numbers.
Okay, well, I'm going to you in culture.
Okay.
Rachel, you're in academic and behavior. And then Ms. Adams, you're in academic and behavior. Is that correct? Yep. All right. And I think that's everybody. Did I miss anybody? All right, so what I'm going to do is stop sharing my screen, crossing all fingers and toes. Let's see. And I'm going to try to put you in breakout rooms. So we're going to have 2 breakout rooms, and I'm going to assign you. So the first breakout is going to be for culture. So let's see. Karen. Joan. Okay, I think that's culture. And so that's 1. Hopefully, I don't see a save button. So hopefully when I toggle off, it's still saved. And then 2 will be Al, Andy, Chris, Sean, Jennifer, Julie, Rachel, and then, okay. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to open rooms. You should go there, and I'm thinking about 30 minutes for this work. How does that sound to everybody? Okay.
That will leave us like 10 minutes for discussion.
Oh, well, you know what? 20 minutes for this work. Thank you. 20 minutes, and then we'll come back with just a brief report out from each of you. So 20 minutes. All right, and this is actually a little bit of a test to see how this works. All right.
What is it that you want us to accomplish in this?
So having conversations about your goals, your short and long-term goals, and coming away with at least one or two next steps related to those.
Okay.
Okay.
Dr. Smith, can
Yeah.
you, I know that the last slide you had up had the, had I think one set on there. Was there 2 slides on that?
So one had the community and culture goals, and the other one had the academic and behavior goals.
Those are the ones at the bottom then?
So the top were long-term, the bottom ones were your short-term.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So we're going to do 20 minutes. Oh, Nita. I bet she's Nita.
From underrepresented populations, ensure equitable discipline practices for students, ensure equitable access to mental health across school settings. So on the short term, hire human resources staff that are knowledgeable about best practices for recruiting, retaining staff from underrepresented populations. Include student leaders in the work of the EDI committee and equity work group. Okay, how much do we need to wait and see for our June 15 meeting to keep moving with our goals, don't you think? Because that meeting on the 15th is going to be about the HR, right? They are coming to tell us the progress on the findings on the follow-up, I would say, on our previous meeting. So I think that is one point that we need to actually consider. And in our subcommittee meeting, when we come back, we can talk about, based on that information that we are getting. Because now I'm thinking, should we prepare for that meeting, having some leading questions or some expectations to see if those expectations are fulfilled, or if we need to give those ideas to the person. What is his name? I forgot his name. Dr.
Martin.
Dr. Martin, yes. If we can have, what are we expecting? We can go either way, wait and see what we hear from him and then make a plan and schedule a follow-up meeting or other, or we can also prepare ourselves to ask some questions or to expect some answers, and if we don't hear the answers, we can start asking the questions again. What would you like better?
So this is Karen. I think that we already know that that's a concern. So would we be proactive in being more prepared when they do present on the 15th, or when they come on the 15th, if we had like a few questions, and then when we get the report or whatever we're going to get from them, we could look at our list and see if some of our concerns have been addressed, and we can check those things off, and then maybe address the things that were not addressed in their presentation or whatever they're going to do. but we already know it's a problem. So I think to wait would be putting it off even further, in my opinion.
I agree, Karen. So how can we align, or what are gonna be our expectations? Because I think we have a very productive conversation, and Dr. Martin seemed very receptive of our ideas and our plans and concerns. Mm-hmm. So still, if we go in terms of our, let's see, can we address our short term on the higher human resources that are knowledgeable about best practices and recruiting, retaining staff? Is that something that we want to see on his spiel or on his presentation? That if he's making some efforts to do that? Because that needs to come from him, right? He's the one that hires the human resources staff.
Mm-hmm. He actually does not. I'll tell you that Dr. Martin is temporary, so he's contracted. Mm. So we have Dr. Martin and Dr. Banzo, who have come here to help out in the interim, and they are helping to kind of recraft HR, and they've done a wonderful job. But what they are doing is, what I'm wondering is, are you asking HR to look at the hiring practices for the system or the hiring practices within HR? Because to me, they're two different things.
It's both. The answer to your question is both.
Okay. So I guess what I would say to you is that what is left to hire within HR is a new assistant superintendent of HR. That is the position that is left to be hired, the permanent position. So that is that, and that's the big one. That's the top of the tree. And that position is probably going to be hired by the permanent superintendent. Mm-hmm. That is not a position that the interim superintendent is going to hire. So right now, Dr. Martin and Anthony Manzo, who is the other contracted person in there, are filling that role jointly.
When will do you have a timeline for hiring the new superintendent?
Well, Dr. Burns's last day is September 1st. So we have to hire that person by September 1st or get another interim in there. So if we don't have, we have the position closed last month, we are now kind of narrowing down our list of first interviewees. If that list doesn't pan out, then we would have to go with an interim again, because Dr. Burns can't work anymore. And at that point, then that second interim. So I'm telling you two different scenarios. If we hire a permanent superintendent, the first hire that they would make would be that assistant superintendent of HR. There are no other hires to make within HR right now unless someone retires or leaves. So I would say that you would need to retrain HR, or you would have to talk to Dr. Martin about what is the training or what are the expectations of HR right now, because there are really no open positions left in HR.
Okay, so if you had to hire a temporary HR after September 1st, would that person be able to address hiring practices and actually hire, or will that still be left up to the superintendent?
Well, what I would say to you is that the goal here is to get a permanent superintendent and then have that permanent superintendent hire the assistant superintendent of HR, which is a big position to fill. And then there are no other open positions in HR at this time other than that one. Mm-hmm. It could be that they would convince Dr. Martin, who's done a great job, to continue along for a while, but he's not interested in a full-time position here. Neither is Mr. Manzo, because they are both retired. So they're just here temporarily. So that permanent position for assistant superintendent of HR has not been advertised yet. So we're just making do with the contracted position right now. So that assistant superintendent position, it has the potential of, you know, retraining staff. They have the potential of recommending other changes, further changes to HR to the superintendent. So there's a lot within that, but there are no other positions that are being created right now.
So what is the board's relationship or goals going forward with the HR person? Do you have any oversight over that position, or is it superintendent?
It's the superintendent. We don't have, you know, as a board, you don't have much day-to-day interaction with any of the departments. You rely very heavily on senior staff and then really your superintendent to say this is how things are working, and to make the recommendation for the hire or to make a recommendation for a reorganization, which is really what just happened within HR. We reorganized. We had the assistant superintendent leave. We had the HR director leave. The HR director position is not going to be refilled. We are just, like I said, right now making do with temporary positions. And then we will fill it with hopefully a very competent assistant superintendent of HR.
And I don't want to.
I know I feel like I'm redirecting the but I think it's hopefully it's helpful to have some background to know what it is that you're asking for when he comes in.
Yeah, and I don't want to hold this session up by asking these questions, but I guess where I'm trying to get is I'm trying to look at timelines and how doable is this, how realistic is this as a short-term goal. I'm wondering when Dr. Martin, when is his last day?
I believe he, and he may be going, I think he's got maybe 3 or 4 more weeks to go, but he may be able to go a little bit farther than that. Mr. Manzo, who's also in HR, I think is going, we have him through the summer. So Dr. Martin, it's a little bit more in flux. We'll keep him as long as we can keep him because he's doing such a great job for us. But I guess what I would say is maybe we could look, maybe one of the questions you could ask is what sort of training or structures are you putting in place for HR right now for those questions that you're asking about the retention and the hiring practices to recruit teachers of color and to retain them, to recruit, I guess it's staff of color. So it's across the board. And I think Dr. Martin would probably answer that.
Yeah. And maybe we need to be looking at the HR person too. What qualifications that we think or characteristics we would like to see in the person that's coming in for HR. It seems like that might happen before the superintendent. I mean, I don't know. We don't really know, but I think we need to be looking at both of those things.
I remember the last time we were able to meet in person, this is, I think, when that short-term goal was articulated, and it was right after those 2 positions had been vacated. So there was a high sense of urgency within our subcommittee to, say, well, when is that hiring going to happen, and who's going to be involved in the hiring of those high-level HR positions? And so now, fast forward through COVID and hearing that context and timeline, I think the last thing Karen said is pretty relevant in terms of regardless of the superintendent, if that superintendent is going to be hiring that assistant superintendent, then what does the EDI committee say? Like what guidance after months of work would we provide to that new individual to say these are priorities or these are commitments we expect? That's just my initial thought.
Because I was thinking on the same line of thought. We can ask Dr. Martin what kind of support he needs from us, like how can we support the framework that he's creating or the guidelines, and we can do that research and contribute with that information to the put together that he's creating, the guidelines that he's putting together for the new hires. So I think that would be something productive that we can do in the meantime while, other bigger decisions are made, and to see if he thinks that is something valuable to him, or if he can give us more specific guidelines so we can go specifically to more, to more detailed aspects of that. If not, we can just research and see what other, other school boards have in place and other guidelines and things that we can kind of research and put together. Would you like that idea, like that? Like presenting that on the meeting after he tell us what he's doing, and then offer our support and see how can we provide our perspective into those guidelines that he's putting together.
I agree. I think it's always good to look to see what other districts are doing.
Yeah, we can see districts that are good and, well-formed. I know we can go here within the state, or we can research, in other ones that have good reputation, that we can trust that they are doing the right thing, so we can try to see that initial exploration.
I think both he and Dr. Burns can speak to that, because I think they formed basically, I think, a leadership team in Wake County that dealt a lot with this issue. And I believe that Dr. Martin was a part of that. So I think that would be a very relevant question to ask him.
Oh, yes, to ask him for, yeah. Mm-hmm.
I feel like being prepared going into the June 15th meeting to be able to very articulate on behalf of the EDI committee and everyone that values equity, diversity, and inclusion. I think it's important to be able to articulate to them and not just kind of talk around generalities about what we're talking about in terms of HR hiring practices, and try to be as specific as we can. And another thought is that I think if we're going to look for other examples of those practices, like the education field is, not the only one. We can look beyond education field to better understand because the education field isn't very diverse staffing. So where are there other professions that have done well at prioritizing that?
I like that thought. So I'm taking notes here. What I'm gonna start doing is creating minutes for our subcommittee meetings. I'm gonna put all the notes with all the members, and we're gonna give this to Tyler, our big boss, even though he doesn't know yet.
Hey, before we go back, I want to make sure friend Sean, I don't know if she's able to still be around, but I know we're going to be going back soon, and I'm always looking out for the people that maybe haven't spoken yet. So in case she's there and has any thoughts.
And I won't be when they go back. I have to go fix my mom's dinner.
Okay. Okay.
Thank you for asking, Casey. I'm just gonna be quiet for right now because I think that's the best thing to do. But thank you so much for asking.
Okay, but are we in agreement with this plan, with this idea? Do we think it's a good next step?
Can you articulate it one time?
I don't know if I can, but we're gonna wait for the meeting, the June 15 meeting from Human Resources with the Miss Dr. Martin, and then we are gonna be looking for some information on hiring practices and the way he's articulated kind of guidelines or a framework in hiring practices. And then we are going to offer our support in the creation of those guidelines. And if he is in agreement with that, we're gonna make a plan to be searching for other models from other places, and we can incorporate and offer the suggestions. That makes sense? And you can help me out putting more, more professional and making more sense when we are presenting it to the big group.
Can I really quick share, and it goes to one of our long-term goals, our student scholarships, our board student scholarships. 2 of our 4 scholarship winners this year are students of color. And that is the first time that's ever happened. And so that, and we were very excited, and they were phenomenal. So that's something that we will approve at the board meeting tomorrow.
Think everybody's coming back? I thought I closed all rooms.
You did, we're back.
We're here.
Yeah, we are all back, I think, 14 participants.
All right, great. All right, let me close that. All right, great, wonderful. I didn't know what I was looking at. Sorry about that. So hopefully, now my first experience with creating breakout rooms, so hopefully no one was injured in that process, and that there was some meaningful conversation as a result of it, and we kind of moved that work forward. And as we do this work, I think this might be a strategy that we continue to use to make sure that we're using this time to actually move things in the direction that we would want them to head. So would love for a share out from our team leads.
Okay, since we are on the screen, we can start. So we focus on our short-term goal of the new hire for human resources, and we agree that is, we remember the reason for us to put it as a short-term goal, because that was right when the position was vacant. Mm-hmm. And now we see that we need to wait for some more time to make that, for this to happen, just because, they has to come from the superintendent, and Lisa was explaining us the way that works. But while our discussion turned around the support that we can offer to Dr. Martin in regards to the framework that he's creating for the new hires. So we are going, number one, we're going to wait for our meeting on June 15 to see, the follow-up on the conversation we had with him, and see how he's rethinking his process, or how he's going along with all the ideas of implementation that he's having. And then we are going to offer how, from our EDI perspective, we can offer support to the creation of those guidelines. If he has specific ideas that he wants us to support him with, or if we can just go and do some research on checking on other, other counties that have it all figured out, or at least it looks more figured out, and then we can bring that expertise or that information here to the discussion, and eventually offer that information to Dr. Martin. Okay. And another good point that was brought up to the meeting is that we don't have to limit our research to only school boards. We can check on other different institutions, that because the equity and diversity is all over, so we can search from different sources and see what we can bring that can be useful for our purpose.
All right, thank you. So the 2 takeaways that I've got them is that you guys are going to wait for the meeting on June 15th, and then to see what the follow-up is from Dr. Martin based on the feedback that you've already given him, and then to offer the perspective from the EDI committee in terms of hiring, and then even offer to be willing to do the research of other districts and other organizations around the issue, around the topic of equity hiring.
Exactly. So that's what we were thinking. And please, members of the committee, if I left anything out, please feel free to add to that. The thing that we want is if he need us, he can use us for research purposes or to support him in any way he want us to work towards that goal of being more inclusive and being more. And we know he has a lot of experience and he did an amazing job with Wake County, and we can use that as a frame of reference. And we can also bring other counties in the like the information from other countries as well. That could be part of the work that we do in our subcommittee if he wants that kind of help.
All right, I appreciate that. And so academic and behavioral, and we can get one of our team leads to share out.
Hey, Dr. Smith, we actually started with the short term and then kind of worked backwards to the long term, and we probably needed about 15 more minutes, but we did our very best. But we thought it might be important to add a third short-term goal around remote learning. Julie did a great job of sharing kind of our remote learning plan that's going on now with the emphasis on PD and learning management systems and just access. We talked a little bit about that, but thought that might need to be a goal given the fact that we have a, that we're experiencing school closures and not knowing what it's going to look like as we come back next year. So don't know if that's possible to add a goal or not, but that was one of the thoughts that we had that might be important. Caress did a great job of taking us through the kind of work that PR is doing and how important it was to promote the work that the equity team is doing and working on, and the work of the district up to this point, as well as future plans. And then when we got to the long-term goals, we talked about the importance of being able to make strong recommendations as this committee sort of advises the board, but just the challenges that would be present as we move that work forward, trying to make sure that we have more diversity in our schools. So we talked about how important that was, regardless of what the counter push might be in the community.
So I'm hearing kind of one action item, possibly two, adding that third short-term goal around remote learning as an action item or next step, and then promoting the work of the equity team through PR. I see the discussion in the chat box around Julie's feedback on trauma for many of our students this summer will be life-defining in terms. Were there action items around that? Any next steps connected to that?
No, that was just a thought I had. Okay. And so certainly it's up to the committee to see the value. And I didn't really know what Julie had in mind, but it could be like a way of implementing something like that. And so maybe if she wanted to share that vision during another breakout, that would be awesome.
Okay. So we'll get Julie next time to maybe to expand upon that.
Okay, that sounds good.
And I know that this is Franchon's area of expertise as well. So maybe there's some co-collaboration there. Okay.
Great.
All right. And excuse me. And so a last item, and thank you for that. I appreciate that. I think this represents the direction that we want to move in. You know, we've looked at our long-term, looked at our short-term. We've got some actionable things to move forward. We've got some team leaders to make sure that action occurs. And so the last thing on our agenda is a topic that has come up many times and is very prevalent, and I think is so centered to so much of what's happening, and that's around the disparities with discipline. And so I won't say too much about that because I want to give as much time as I can to Julie, and then for a little bit of time for discussion around this topic. So I'll stop now and just turn it over to Ms. Varnum.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Smith. So I know we don't have much time, but I wanted to at least create some points for dialogue. And I'm glad we already had the discussion about policy changes and the support of the School Boards Association in completing the policy edits for our district. I am very, very much in support of that process and really looking forward to what it brings to our district, because it's going to really make sure that we're aligning different state board processes or policies along with general statutes that for North Carolina, along with federal regulations. And so it'll really tether a lot of those requirements together. And then our protocols or procedures following policies will have less room for error as long as we're compliant with those. So a couple of points to consider about policy 8410, which is our student code of conduct or student discipline policy. It was last revised in April of 2014. So it's quite dated in policy worlds and policy lifespans anyway. And I think it's important to note that it's dated prior to legislated implementation of MTSS, multi-tiered systems of support, where those processes call for the highest evidence base available for instructional and student support practices. So thinking through how we support in an MTSS framework, and it really doesn't work like a triangle anymore, it kind of works like layers. But when we think about thank you for letting me be visual. When we think about, what we do for all students, that would be the core instructional practices or core curriculum. And then, on top of that, what do we need to do for some more students? Or what more do we need to do for some of those students? So we kind of put the more on top of that. And then in this tertiary model, we do have a few students at the very top that need all three layers. So how do we do that in supporting not only behavioral or social emotional learning needs, but also academic? So, it's really important for a discipline policy to match the prerequisite requirements for handling a behavior issue as discipline. And so next, I think it's also important to note that, while our disciplinary steps in the policy are outlined, it doesn't cross-reference to not only MTSS, but it doesn't cross-reference to our governance agreement, which we kind of generally call that school and court partnership or school justice partnership. Let me move the screen over. And so we have a rather advanced protocol for as an agreement for a county school system working through our SROs and how kids get into or access or find themselves accessing the court system, and what types of situations need to be referred to SROs, and what types of situations should we handle internally without utilizing an SRO that then is compelled to follow through with some kind of documentation that leads to a criminal record or criminal pathway. So of course, policy 8410, all in all, is really in need of some revision. And then I was looking at a policy brief recently, actually from the Center for Racial Equity in Education, CREED, which is one of our partners for professional development for our administrators. But, really looking at a policy brief that they had published regarding North Carolina suspension rates, but also relative to kind of consistency in national suspension rates, on whether we would see a difference if we created a due process step within short-term suspensions where honestly, where I've got our just a one piece of data at the bottom, and I have plenty more I can share. But I thought it was really kind of important to note that, 63%, I can't actually see my whole screen. I think I need to, oh, and now I just made it worse. I made the chat really big. where 63% of suspensions are made up by African American students, but they're only 20% of the population. And that is a significant disparity, significant disproportionate assignment of those. And so where do we tease out those pieces? There are many places to engage in the discussion. Is it that we're looking at behavior versus behavior? Are we not considering culturally responsive teaching practices? I know that, the work we're doing with administrators, the work Dr. Smith is doing with administrators specifically, with the partnership with CREED, I know is really taking us in a different place with that. But this is something we have to really keep our finger on. And also we're seeing a little bit, this data is 2 years old or a year old, but if we looked at the population now, we're only at 18.5% of our students are African American. So I don't know that I want to really create the dialogue points unless you want me to, Dr. Smith, but I'm happy to do that. I think that many of these points beg some discussion and some next steps within this group, but also for policy implementation.
Well, again, we don't have a lot of time for this conversation, but we did want to put this data out here, and we did want to at least begin the discussion. And so I would just open it up for comments from the group, and maybe even thoughts and about how do we want to move forward with this.
So I guess one question that I would have would be, is it consistent across schools, or is there a differentiation between rates across schools? Like if there are trends or outliers that could enable the administration to take action, or kind of dig into and start questioning why a certain school might be statistically significant, and is that part of the process? It may already be part of the process. I don't know. That would be an interesting question.
Okay.
Do you want me to kind of respond to that, Dr. Smith, or you want me to just capture
Well, let's see if there are other questions.
Okay.
Well, I really appreciate that thought and question. I hadn't thought about that, and so my role, as some of you know, at a middle school is in the position of coordinator for multi-tiered systems of support that are referenced there. And so I think, when we talk about multi-tiers, we always go back to the first tier. And so when you're looking at behavioral or discipline data that is so out of whack, we know that first tier, in the way that you reference the culturally responsive teaching, that right there is going to shift, number one, behaviors for students, but it's also going to shift the cultural understanding and cultural competence of the educators and the adults that are interacting with the students, and misunderstanding behaviors that they are then, like, that's the ripple effect. So the due process is like at the end of that's like real late in the game. The very first step in my perspective is that first tier of how we're interacting with students and how we're understanding from a culturally competent perspective when we interact with them, so that before I send them out of my room, because it's the ripple effect of that first step that leads to that pipeline that we talk about.
Yep.
Okay. And then anything else before maybe we get Ms. Varner to kind of respond to Sean's question? And Casey, I agree completely with you.
Yeah.
I think that we need to look at changing that number. That's not, we need to lower that number. And so from a policy standpoint, we need to start investigating what is it going to take to get there.
And I think, to Casey's point, and Casey, definitely correct me if I'm wrong, it really centers around adult behavior. It really centers around adult behavior. So
You're
Julie,
not wrong.
okay, thank you.
But I would say, I would put it like it's more a lack of, as Casey said, lack of cultural competence, and it's more the teachers putting what they know, what they're being raised with, and know what they really need to know in terms of how to deal with diverse population in the classroom. So it's pretty much like sending all of us back to school to learn this new reality that is upon us, that is not gonna go away, if only it's gonna get more diverse by the minute. So we need to get everybody in the mindset. We need to stop fighting it and stop trying to find people that look like me all the time in my room so I can understand exactly, and they look on my eyes and they know exactly what I'm expecting from them. They need to understand that every classroom they get, every group that they get is different, and I need to be prepared with all my tools to deal to give the best chance for those children to learn and to feel comfortable. And that starts with what we are doing, the implicit bias training. That is a huge step because not many teachers know about that and knew about that. And now at least they know I might be prejudicial against something, even if I think I'm not. Everybody is. So that kind of conversation that we started, but it's still a long, long, long way to go.
Right, we're not done. So what I'd like to do is just kind of in closing, give Julie a chance to answer Sean's question, and then we'll close with our plus delta in a word from Ms. Eastep.
So Sean, kind of to without overgeneralizing, some schools suspend more than other schools. Some schools use suspension as a sooner response or more often response to negative behavior. And among those, I think the trend is pretty consistent. There isn't really an outlier. It's just that some schools don't suspend as much. And there can be almost limitless reasons and discussion points about kind of where that comes from and how that happens. And Casey, I want to add to, or echo what you said. Very well said. Talking about due process, that's a policy discussion, but in practice, we shouldn't get to the policy pieces until we are considering every single moment or interaction and how that matters. The moments and interactions with our kids, excuse me. And really that culturally responsive teaching piece is so important. I mentioned in the first bullet that it's important to see that the latest legislation calls for highest evidence base. Excuse me. Well, the evidence base for changing behavior says adult behavior changes before student behavior changes. So agree. Well, I'm choking.
Great. Well, thank you, Julie. And again, this conversation is not over. We're not trying to rush it in any way, shape, or form. We just wanted to begin it and initiate it. And so we will circle back around to this. And if you have suggestions or directions for us in regards to this, please share. We are definitely over time, and I appreciate the time that you've given to this. I just want to remind you that next meeting we'll hear our update from HR. I've already reached out to them. They're preparing that presentation for us. And then in closing, if you don't mind dropping some plus deltas in the chat, and then Ms. Eastep, I'll give it to you to kind of close the meeting for us this evening.
I'm going to actually let Stephanie go ahead and close.
All right. Just thank you all so much for the insights. I know that this has been an emotional week for a lot of us, and this is a safe space that it is always such a joy to be able to be honest and passionate. And so just appreciate the work that is going on and that you keep showing up. And that says a lot about the dedication to the district and to our kids and to equity and justice. So let's keep it up. And, there's hope. We keep working together. We'll get there. So thank you.
Thank you to you all, and hope everyone has a good, safe evening. All right, thanks.